For more on the casino space, let's bring in Chad Beynon, who's the senior gaming, lodging, and theaters analyst at Macquarie. You got a lot of companies in your coverage universe, and the gaming stocks this week have responded so strongly to their earnings, even though I don't know, you do this for a living. I would characterize it as okay, right? Did you expect this sort of outsized reaction?
We did not. Thanks for having me, Contessa and Brian. So an interesting stat is the casino operators have underperformed for 5 straight years. So heading into this year, our view was expectations are way too low. Obviously, interest rates, have the possibility of coming down, and that'll be positive for valuations. And these were a few of our top names. So I think it was really kind of an expectations game. And to your point, Contessa, the commentary that we've heard in terms of post-election, and then more importantly, the first 45 days in February, that from DraftKings this morning, that from Wynn last night, was just much more positive than we would have thought. And, historically, these companies are going to be somewhat cautious this early in the year. They're going to talk about all the puts and takes, but I think analysts and investors are more positive. So you've seen, double-digit increases on the 3 names you touched on, and we have a lot of earnings to go this season.
I thought it was surprising how much commentary we were getting on the current quarter on the earnings calls. So, for instance, you got a lot of color around China and what's happening there around Chinese New Year. How does that change your models or the way you're thinking about Macau and the rebound that has been sort of lackluster? We're still not back up to pre-pandemic levels in terms of gaming or visitation. How do you set the scene on that?
Sure, absolutely. Some of the companies choose to not give in-quarter commentary. Las Vegas Sands, for instance, reported earnings last week. The stock popped about 10% on that print, and it's kind of came back down. Now, they're one of the companies that are somewhat hesitant in terms of giving in-quarter numbers. What we've heard so far is Chinese New Year was just elongated. Generally, there's this pause before Chinese New Year, and then after Chinese New Year, it's kind of the hangover, right? But what we've seen now, it's kind of a multi-week or multi-day period where it's not as much kind of a peak and valley. It's been a little bit more consistent, and I think that's positive for just the breadth of the market in China. Obviously, there's a number of things that could stimulate that market. We're looking for about 8% growth in Macau for 2025. That compares to, U.S. markets that are going to be somewhere between flat and 2%.
And really,
but Macau is probably the one that can dial up the most.
What we have seen is the stock prices for the Macau-facing casinos hovering about the same levels that they were around the pandemic. They just have not bounced since then. I want to move to the sports books, because the other thing that you heard on the DraftKings call was a question about events contracts. Sportico got some really interesting information from Kalshi talking about the massive increase that it saw in action during the game. If Kalshi and Crypto.com going through the CFTC can offer what is essentially sports betting, but do it without paying the sort of extravagant billions that we've seen from the sports books in terms of lobbying, licensing, legalization, making sure that regulations are up to date, state taxes, which are going up. If they can do all of that, how big of a competitive juggernaut are these events contracts for the likes of DraftKings and FanDuel?
It's a great question. It's the $1 million question. We always have to remember that the gaming operators paid to have the rights to operate in that state, right? Everyone isn't valid to offer a sports bet there. So that's something that DraftKings worked really hard for to have that opportunity to offer a contract there. Now, the contracts that you're talking about, they're very different than what we see with regular sports betting here. We still believe that the gambling industries will try to push down some of these new competitors here. They've done it with things like sweepstakes. They've done it with the underground market. When items like this pop up, they take their time and then they'll voice their opinion. But we do think it could be a small threat, but something that these companies just don't have the tech or the license to really impede on DraftKings growth for 25 or 26.